All right. Shalom. Today, November the 4th, we are recording this with it's November the 4th, 2024, Parshat Lekh Lecha. Welcome to a new year of our study. Of course, we are uh, day 395 of uh, the hostages, and it has been, I guess, now the custom to begin any kind of class presentation. I do all my Parsha talks. We are talking about them and thinking about them because we can't, detach ourselves from the reality that we find ourselves in. Um, and of course, coming together to study Torah is one way of trying to cope with the world. I'm not sure I'm going to answer questions about the world in this class. I'm get very focused on uh, a specific question, a specific theme, and it has to do with the whole notion of the altar. I just want to we'll go back to that in a second, but I'm just gonna go right into it. We have uh, this parsha begins with the words that are familiar to us. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go forth from your land, from your kindred, from your father's house, El Haaretz Asher Eka, to the land I will show you. I'll make you a great nation. I'll bless those who bless. I'll bless you, make your name great, be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you, and all the clans of the earth will find blessing through you. And so here, Abraham goes and does what God asks him. Lot, and Lot he goes with him. And Abraham is 75 years old when he went out of Haran. As I read these verses, I'm kind of enlivened by the fact that we have looked at these in such great depth over the years that each one of these verses, each phrase is literally a whole story in itself. Like, the whole idea of Lot that goes with him, Lot who goes with him, and that he's 75 years old and all that. And of course, those are classes that you could look up on YouTube. He takes his wife, he takes his Lot, and Hanefesh Asher Asu b'Charan, the persons he made in Haran. Vayitzula lechet arza Canaan, he goes to Canaan. He passes through the land as far as Shem, and the Canaanites are in the land. And here, Vayera Adonai el Avram Vayomer, God says, or God was seen by Avram and said, Lezaracha etenet haaretz azot, I give this land to your seed. Vayiven sham mizbeach ladonai hanir elav, and he builds an altar to God who had been seen by him, and that is Abraham's first altar. Okay, so I want you to focus on this because this is the story here. The story is God calls him, and he moves, and he comes through the land, and God tells him that I will give this land to your seed. Vayera, God was seen. It's interesting language. Vayera Adonai el Avram vayomer. God was seen by Abraham and said, I give this land to your seed. And he builds an altar there to God who had been seen. So my question is, what's with the altar? All right. Now, this isn't a nice question. We already had an altar. When? At the end of the Noah story. What happened? Noah built an altar to God. He took from all the pure animals and from all the pure birds and offered them offerings on the altar. And I said in the sheet on Shabbat, the story, what's the story? The altar is a monumentalization, a demarcation of a boundary of two eras. And I offered that an altar is a boundary marking thing that when a person in the biblical system offers up burnt offerings especially, uh, maybe others, but the burnt offering, which is the animal that is completely consumed by fire, going to God, that's just not a gesture of awe and generosity. It's a statement that we are marking something in time, and and the marking in time is this is the point between two eras. So I'm approaching the altars that are going to be appearing in the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with the idea, is it, just a second, is it a demarcation point in time? And I will stop the share and ask Marlene to give us a question. Go
What
ahead.
happened to the sacrifices that Cain and Abel were giving? Is
Oh,
it
very good
implied that
question.
they had an altar?
So it does it doesn't say that. Okay? We're very,
Well, they
very,
held them in their hands and burned them?
you know, they could have done just that. I know. No, I what I'm saying is obviously I don't want to say obviously. Um, it says they brought gifts. It's interesting that it doesn't say they brought olot. So, Vayave Kain mi pri hadama. Kain brings from the fruits of mincha Adonai. What does that mean? So we superimpose on that story our religion. We're so religious. We impose a religious sensibility on that story. We've constructed already. Cain has his own shrine, and he has his own little temple, and he has his own little platform, and there's nothing of that said there because the Torah is really not interested in that. But besides that, I think the Torah is going to be focused on altars because it has there's a certain story to be told with altars, and 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 this is also Cain and Abel. They're primitive. It's a very primitive form of worship. So I mean, almost what I enjoy about it is that it kind of mirrors a certain evolution. This is, the Cain and Abel story is at least the first story in the Bible that you can kind of, put a dot there. That's where, quote unquote, a religious experience happens, okay?
But
But it
but
doesn't happen in the formality, one second. It doesn't happen in the formality of that we are accustomed to as religious experience. Now, Skip, I saw you waving your hand. Go ahead.
could it be that they made the gifts to the tree of life?
To the tree of it could have made it to anything. I mean,
I
I
mean, I mean, they could have made it to a stone. It
no,
could,
it says I'm only going to go on what the text says. The text says they brought it to God. They have an experience. They're bringing it to God, and it doesn't use the word altar there. Okay, so what it means is that that and it also doesn't say, Marlene. It doesn't say that he sacrifices as an olah. It doesn't use the technical language, is what I'm saying. Vayave, I'm just gonna, I happen to have a Bible here, so I'll just quote the verses. It says, "Vehevel hevi gamhu mibchorot sono michal." He brings it. Vayisha Adonai el hevel vel minchoto, and God pays attention to it. So I have read into that a bunch of things. One, that he slaughters them. Two, that he burns them. And three, that it's on some kind of platform, but it doesn't tell us any of this, okay? And that's I think intentional because we're leaving out altars until we get, people like Abraham or people like Noah. Noah is the first altar, I don't want to say it, altar
but
man. Okay,
but
he's the first.
but, but Rabbi,
Yeah.
isn't the tree of life?
No, no, no
No,
tree
no,
of
no, 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 no.
life.
The first altar.
No, no, sorry, nothing to do with an altar, nothing to do with this.
No, it's
No, it's just not. It's not there. It's just the text doesn't say that.
sorry
Okay,
to
sorry. Okay,
disagree
we
with
gotta
you.
move on. We gotta move on. All right,
Okay.
all right. So now, so I'm offering a beginning theory, which is that altars mean something, and in the case of Noah, it means it's a defining feature, okay, of defining between eras. So back to Abraham then. So what could it mean with Abraham? Abraham's and there's my little picture that I used this on the sheet. Isn't it interesting? That's from uh, the Crumb. His name is the cartoonist. Okay, so let's go back to Abraham. וירא אדוני אל אברהם, ויאמר לזרעך אתן את הארץ הזאת, ויבן שם מזבח לאדוני הנראה אליו. And he builds an altar there. Okay, look what it says and look what it doesn't say. It says he builds an altar. It says God appeared to him. It says God spoke to him. But what it doesn't say, it doesn't tell us what he did there. Does it tell us that he sacrificed there? Does it tell us that he took sheep there? It doesn't give us that. Are we assuming? We could assume that. I mean, why else would you build an altar if to not engage in sacrifices? But I'm going to just do my questions here, which is, or my comments. He builds the altar as a response to God who had been seen. Is he building is he doing it as a request? What does he do at the altar, and does he get a response? So he says, God says, "L'zaracha etena ha'aretz hazot." I'm going to give you this land to your seed. So he builds an altar there. Okay, and now I'm going to ask you what is probably seemingly a simple question. It's just a statement of fact or a question of fact. What do you know about Abraham at this point? That's pretty obvious in terms of Lazaracha Tenet Haaretz. I will give this land to your seed. What's the obvious fact about his biography here? Go ahead, Ilana. Yeah, Ilana.
It's not about what you're asking right now. I'm just going back a little bit. I'm trying to figure out why is building an altar or giving sacrificing a symbol of what? Of appreciation? Why do you have to put the animals or vegetables or to say thank you or to why this way? Why can't you
Why
say
this way?
thank you very much and go on with your life?
I love the question because it's such an important question that I just forgot to ask. Okay, and I'm going to try and answer it in a brief way, which is to say, I mean, the question represents the fact that we live so far removed from this that we really, really don't understand it. So what I'm going to try and suggest in a minute is, or in a short way, is what this does. Okay, so a person lives with animals, right? We all are, we have to go back to the pre-industrial era, agriculture era, where you live off of the land and the food that is brought by your crops and by animals. In the biblical worldview and in the world of ancient human beings, animals are they're it's life, okay, and they are containers. They have blood which is life. Now, in the biblical system, in the temple system, in the sanctuary system, there was a drama here that was represented in sacrifice, which included slaughter and pouring the blood on the altar so that it would go back to God. Now, is it a question of, is it representing us or not? I don't know. Okay, some scholars think that the sacrifice is a substitution for us, for human beings. Some say it's not. I approach it a little bit differently, which is if you imagine yourself presenting a sacrifice to at an altar, certain things have to happen. One is that you're standing there with an animal, and that 1 second the animal is alive, and the second the animal is dead. You are in direct contact with this in a way that is very, very personal and powerful. It's almost akin to, I mean, I said our only contact with larger animals, that between life and death is roadkill. If you ever hit an animal when you're driving, it's always accidental, and for a split second, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. When you think about it, rationally, it should not be terrifying at all. Why? Because, I mean, and they teach you this in driver's education, right? Don't worry about killing an animal because you're going at such a speed, and if you swerve, whatever, you're going to kill someone else. So better to kill the animal than kill. So I mean, I know it's nonsense to say this, but the moment that happens, you are shaken. Means you're in contact with life and death, and that is that moment of terror and awe is the moment that is brought before God, okay? And that is something where you're the deepest part of your humanity, which is your contact with power, is is raw and open. It's open there. And that's what's going on in a sacrifice. I don't think that explains it. There's also a sense of, I guess, giving something, and this is the vocabulary and the symbology of giving something that's valuable. Now it doesn't work for us. I know that there are parts of the Jewish people that would like to return to it, but what I can validate in the fact that this is part of it, is part of the tradition, is that it was very, very powerful and obviously commanded a tremendous amount of people's imagination and attention, for good or for bad. And for many, many years, especially after the temple was destroyed, people longed for this because it was the basic vocabulary of how to worship. Once that vocabulary was lost, they were lost too. I know we have a lot of hands up here, so we'll go to John and then to Bob. Go ahead. Unmute. Yeah. And then Marlene.
I'm going to answer the question you asked before Ilana asked her question. You asked something about the seed.
Yes.
What's obvious, and I guess my answer would be he had no seed at the time. He had no children.
Sure. That was the point, that he is building, and God promises him L'zaracha et enet haaretz, but he's got, I'll give you the land to your seed, but there is no seed. And Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, John said what I was going to say. The only thing that I recently heard another rabbi's commentary, that are we sure that the order of the thing is reversed, and that maybe this is out of place time-wise, that in fact this event happens after, in fact, he has. And so there was an analysis someone made that we're not following a linear sequence necessarily here.
Okay, so I'm only smiling because we pull out those arguments when we need to, okay? And we do need to do that. And of course we could configure the narrative, in a lot of different ways, if we have the license to kind of, redo the jigsaw here. And so I'm going to start from a different premise, which is I'm reading along as it's being narrated, and I'm going to try and make sense of it in the sequence. There may be reasons sometimes to say that it's out of place, but I think there's a very compelling interpretation to be given here for his building an altar at this point. Marlene, go ahead.
I want to ask about gratitude. Couldn't building an altar without any kind of a sacrifice just be gratitude? We have totems, we have makom kavua, we have a place that's a special place. So could that have been what he built?
And the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. That why, I'm going to ask myself the question, which is, why do you think it's only one thing? Like, do you here, Chacham, right? You're saying that Noah made an altar. I've tried to, bound your mom, but that's very sophisticated to say this. He's differentiating between the pre-flood and the post-flood era. And so I sound very smart, okay? However, and I poo-pooed the idea that Noah was offering a Thanksgiving offering because it's a burnt offering. It's not a Thanksgiving. If it was a Thanksgiving offering, he would have made a feast. He would have, it would have been nice sheep, and they would have, would invited the sons and their wives and his wife to have a meal, and it would have been, let's, he instead of getting drunk in his tent alone naked, he would have raised his glass of wine and said, it would have been a Thanksgiving meal. Like he would have sat around and said, we have survived, and here we are.
We
Okay.
don't
Yeah.
we don't have food with all of our tefillot. When we come to the synagogue and we say Bimhera b'yameinu, the way it used to be.
Sure. Okay, but it the prayer itself functions as a powerful symbol. You obviously don't need food for every kind of moment of Thanksgiving, but
So giving of yourself, you're giving more, and it's burned up, it's gone, it's not yours. It wasn't yours to begin with.
I want a tangible act to symbolize something that I can't express with words. And I symbolize things with building, putting a monument up. I have a very limited, vocabulary or palette of symbols. One needs to be very creative as a religious person, but in the end, you're stuck with a few transcendent things. One of them is space, and the other is time, and the other is life itself. So you can put a monument up, and you could or you could slaughter something, or you could eat something. And we tend to, whatever it is, whenever I have to design a ritual or design a ceremony, I'm very conscious of this, that some ceremonies don't involve food, and some ceremonies will involve food. I'll give you just my example. We have Kristallnacht coming up, okay? Okay, so every year we do a ceremony for Kristallnacht. And forgive my sin, but you don't want to go to Kiddush afterwards, okay? It's not a food, but we're all together, so there's going to be a food there, but food is not part of the ceremony, as opposed to, let's say, the Seder, which is all about the food. Okay, Ilana, go ahead.
I'm just going to say very shortly, as a thank you or appreciating a good thing, and that you want to acknowledge in your life. Today we give a donation that goes.
Very nice. That's a perfect example.
Goes to good deeds, to where it's needed.
Exactly. So a donation functions as a symbolic gesture, a symbolic act. This, and one could even use sacrificial terminology, because especially if it's of a significant nature, but even if it's a smaller nature, it's I don't know, $18 that I'm not using on myself. It's $18 that I'm going to go to one less movie or something like that.
I just hope people gave yesterday for the Federation.
There you go. Okay, good. All right. So this was there's the possibility here that he's building an altar, maybe for Thanksgiving, or maybe because he has no seed, right? And there's a gap here. The gap here, which is playing itself throughout the Abraham story, is here's God's promising him everything, and he's got nothing. So the natural human response is, well, I'm building an altar to you, and I want to elicit from you blessings. This is what I'm staying here, and we're gonna try and see if this idea satisfies the next couple of examples. That was Abraham's first altar. Okay, I'm saying that he is building the altar. Doesn't say that he sacrifices anything on it, but it's possibly a request. And I'll just stop here. Marlene, go ahead.
It says the God had been seen by him, not known by him, but seen by him. Does that mean he saw something? That he encountered something physically? Or was
don't
this an understanding? It doesn't say he understood him.
right. So uh good. These are interpretive questions that are, part of the whole, it's like the whole accordion of Judaism. You know, Maimonides, what do these things mean? And I'm gonna pull the card that says, I don't know. And that's, that's a conversation that is a deep philosophical question in terms of what constitutes the divine conversation. We're reading it literally on a level here where we are we are acknowledging these questions, but don't understand exactly what the dynamic is, and yet we know that there's a dynamic going on between God. The Torah works on the basis of, the divine being breaks through to human beings. How that happens and what, you know method or medium, we don't know. Okay. All right. We go on. So that was altar number one. Altar number two. Vayatek Misham, he moved there from the highlands. It's right after, by the way. It's the next verse. Okay. Vayatek Misham Ahara, he goes up. And Mikedem Levetel, Vayet Olo Beit El Miyam, Vay Mikedem, Vayiven Sham Yizbech Ladonai, Vayikra B'Shem Adonai. He moves on the highlands east of Bethel, spread his tent Bethel toward the sea and Ai to the east. He built an altar to God, and he called out the name of God. I just have to do this for a second because I think we have this medium, and I have all of these things at my disposal. So you'll take exactly 1 minute to do this. Here we go.
The book of Genesis opens with the story of the creation of the world and of humanity from Adam to Noah and the Tower of Babel. It then introduces Abraham, the patriarch from whom the people of Israel
Which is exactly
are
how
said
he
to be
looked.
descended.
Okay.
Abraham is presented as having come originally from the city of Ur in Chaldea. He left southern Mesopotamia with his father, brother,
This is what I
and the
love
rest
about
of
it.
his family.
It animates the
Settled first
whole
in Haran, a
beautiful.
town which lay on the tributary of the Euphrates to the north of today's Syria. According to Genesis, God came to Abraham and ordered him to leave Haran, his country and his father's house, and go into the country that God would show him, which was none other than the country of Canaan. It was here that Abraham received the double promise that he would have many descendants, and that the land of Canaan would be passed down to them. Nevertheless, as soon as Abraham arrived in the town of Sichem in Canaan,
Shechem.
there was a famine which forced him.
Oh, okay. So this little animation skips over a couple of really important points, which is that before he goes down to Egypt, he moves around a little bit here. And I actually tried to find the better map, but I like the fact that it's animation and you get the whole point there. That was a good 1 minute little breath, okay, of animation there, visual stimulation. Okay, so what happens? He moves and he builds another altar. He built another altar. We're back to my altars. This is altar number 2. And it says here, Vayikra b'Shem Adonai. All right. So I want to put myself in Abraham's shoes here. I'm going to close the screen for a second and say, okay, so God told me to move. I moved. I'm 75 years old. I don't have a child yet. My wife and I are barren. We're 75. She's 65. Okay. We moved. I moved with my nephew Lot. I got my whole retinue of people. God's told me I have gonna inherit the whole land. Fine. It's not happening here. I didn't get answered. I built an altar already in Shechem. Nothing doing. Okay. Let's pack it up. We'll move to another place on the highlands, right? Moving south, if you can imagine, we're in what is presently called, what we call Samaria, and he's moving south, and he's moving to another place on the ridge of those mountains, and he builds another altar, and it says in that building, Vayikra b'Shem Adonai. He is calling to God. So what is he calling for? What's he asking for? If you said children, you might be right. I guess he has no children. All right. And he wants to fulfill what God has promised, but nothing is doing. Nothing is by Krabashem Adonai. And there's
Are
no
we
answer.
there yet?
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? No, we're not. Obviously, we're not there. So Vayiven Sham Mizbech, and he's trying to elicit the blessing, the response from God. God has promised him already this, but it's not happening. Okay? So why did he move? Why did he build an altar? What's different this time? What's different is that he calls out to God's name. Did he get an answer? No. Then there's altar 3. And before we get to altar 3, there's a bunch of things that happen. He travels to the Negev. He goes to Egypt. He has that whole story of Pharaoh. Pharaoh tries to sleep with Sarah. He returns from Egypt. He goes back to his first eye. He separates from Lot. Lots and lots of things happen. God promises again, I'm going to give you all the land. I'm going to make your seed like the dust of the earth. You can't measure it. And then it says, and modern Israelis hear there's a beautiful song, there's beautiful music to this, but I'm reading it with such a tragic sense, because he's got nothing. And God is telling him, go walk about, go, make your boundaries. I'm going to give you the land. Then it says, he moved his tent and came. It's further south along the ridge, now in the Judea area. Eventually, built another altar. This is altar number 3 that he builds. Okay? Nothing happening. No response. Okay? So, 1 second, Mora. Alana, based on what we have so far, can we establish a theory of altars? Maybe, but I'm going to stop the share, and then Alana, go ahead.
Well, it seems like God wants to have many altars with sacrifices before he keeps his promise. Why is he waiting with his promise? Why did they have to be 90 and 100 to have finally a child? What's the point?
This is the aggravating question. Okay, you know what? I want to say it with humor, which is, if you and I wrote the Bible, I think it would be different. We would be kinder to him. We seriously would be kinder to him. I mean, first of all, anybody who reads this, it stretches our credulity to try and understand that Abraham is this old and having a child. Okay, we are feeling the impossibility of it, and we're feeling stretched in terms of to what degree is God asking a human being to have faith or to be trusting in God. Okay, and this is I mean, this is Abraham's problem, but let's face it, this is our problem. This is what it means to be a human being, and I think this is what it means to be a Jew, in the sense that we are claiming we have a relationship with God. We're trusting God. We trust, and that it's always tested, but that's all. There's always a limit that's placed to it. And there are times in a person's life when that trust is fractured, broken, and when it has to be knitted together again. And this is what's going on here. I think it's depending on what everybody's judgment is, how subjective you are, what's the limit? At what point, and I'll ask, Ilana or John or Bob, at what point, you're at the top row here. So at what point do you say, I'm out of here. I'm done. I am done. I can't take this anymore. You want a people? Go choose someone else. I can't do this. Okay. And that would be, we would understand if someone responded to it. But Abram doesn't respond that way. And that tells us something about him. It says, I'm willing to put up with this. I'm willing to put up with this because you're that important to me. Look, I mean, I could talk about all sorts of relationships that follow along that model, where where there's tremendous, friction in the partners of a relationship, and yet they put up with each other, I guess for a couple of reasons. One, which would be they love each other, and two, they're loyal to each other. And what is the limit of your loyalty? And Abraham is basically saying, my loyalty is unlimited. Marlene, go ahead.
Are you equating loyalty, hope, and trust?
I'm putting it all in the same kind of basket. Yes. I'm saying that I mean, to the extent that you can in any relationship, filament out, all of those things, they're braided, okay? We all live in personal relationships where they're braided with that, whether it's a relationship with a parent or a child or a spouse or a partner or whatever, you know, a relationship consists of trust, a relationship consists of love, a relationship consists of mutuality, and interdependence. Okay, and in a therapist's office, you could probably unbraid it and analyze it, but here it's all together, and Abraham, you could already tell that Abraham's being asked all of these things. Bob, go ahead.
Since you invited me, I just, while you were speaking, asked artificial intelligence to tell me what symbolism the altars are, and I'll just quickly read what they said, if I may.
Yeah.
Because according to Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladi, that's the one of the Hasidic founders, Abraham's altars were stages in the spiritual evolution of Judaism. The altars represented different stages of Abraham's spiritual growth and were built after each divine encounter. Altar of conversion, place of pardon; altar of communion, a place of prayer; altar of covenant, a place of praise; and the altar of consecration, a place of willingness.
Yeah, and far be it for me to engage in a debate with Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And obviously, what he's doing there is putting it in a system, maybe a Kabbalistic system, where each of the altars has to represent something. And I'm putting all of that aside and saying I'm trying to relate to Abraham as a human and a person. And I love saying I love these stories because it's my family. I'm talking about my family. Talking about, I really make the leap in the sense that we're talking about people that we know, we're familiar with them. And so in my familiarity with them, I'm saying, what's going through your mind? Now there's the pietistic, mystical reading, which is, it's all engaged in these kinds of symbolism, which you put out. And then there's a non-mystical reading, which is, look, you promised me this and you haven't delivered. And you know what? I'm upset about that. I want to follow you. Yes, I'm loyal to you. I'm dedicated to you. I believe in you. Blah, blah, blah. But you're making it hard. And it's hard to do this under these circumstances, but I'm going to still try. And that's what Abraham is. Go ahead, Ruth. John and Ruth.
So Abraham seems to be willing to put up with a lot, and he doesn't seem to have a limit of what he won't do. And yet Moshe, which I guess usually outscales Abraham, Moshe couple times, right? Like when he was at the burning bush, he goes, I don't want this job, pick somebody else. And then at another time he said, erase me from your book. I've had it with these people, these rebels. Right. So Abraham never does that, and Moshe more than once says, let me out of here.
Well, it's great to put Moses up as a counterweight, as a different example. It's a different kind of relationship altogether, and that relationship elicits a different set of colors, I want to say a different music. It's a different tonality in the whole relationship. I mean, it's whatever analogy you want to use in terms of generational or cultural differences. It would be the difference between, Baroque versus Romantic versus, jazz. I mean, they're speaking in a different idiom because the relationship is much more intense. And the purpose of the relationship, by the way, is also different. Abraham is a founder. Abraham is I am choosing you in the Bible's, view of the world. Is God, I am choosing you to be the father of a nation, because there are 70 nations in the world now, and none of them have a blessing that are going to bring to the world. And God, want so desperately to bring blessing to the world, and I need a vessel and an instrumentality for that. And I just can't choose an ordinary person for that. I need to choose someone who's willing to put everything on the line for me. Everybody, I love you all. I love you all equally, is what God is saying. This is how, this is where anti-Semitism begins, right? Because the choice of Abraham makes everybody jealous. And it's a total misreading of the Bible to say that it's better, that I love you more. It's I need someone who has a talent for this. You others have talents for other things. And my goal is to bring blessing into the world, and for that I need a relationship that is different, and that's why I'm going to put you to the limit. Everybody else, you can admire that. You don't have to envy that. Your job is to be challenged by that and to admire it and not to envy it. John, go ahead.
I think one reason why Abraham is frustrated is that God comes to him wholly unsolicited, out of left field. There's no reason given why God chooses Abraham. God seeks Abraham out, but we don't know why. And we don't know anything about Abraham as to why he's worthy of it. So a promise is made by someone who comes out of left field. And I would think, you say, what's the natural reaction? I would think a natural reaction would be to ask why. He's building an altar, but making a request. But I think I would ask, why are you doing this? Why me? And he
Right.
doesn't do that. He doesn't question that. He just does it.
Which is, I mean, we could interpret that in at least two directions, which is good on Abraham. He will be responsive without having to ask the question. And there's a model of that behavior in terms of loyalty and in terms of dedication. Look, the Midrash and everything, we could go for miles and miles on what it was and what he saw and all that. And of course, we love the idea that Abraham, is reflected in legend and Midrash, as this kind of theological prodigy who is able to discern in a world that knows of, polytheism and paganism and evil, is able to discern the one God. That's great, but it's not in the text. The text is exactly as you put it, which is God basically says, jump, and Abraham says, how high? You will follow him with obedience, but also you can sense here the tension. Go ahead, Alana.
This is going through all our history events. Every once in a while, we have very, very bad times, and we give sacrifices in lives. And I had to compare it to what is happening today, but every day, Israel sacrifices soldiers and people who live there, and the promise did not take place yet. Yeah, we have the land, but we have to fight so hard to really keep it. So I know there's no answer. But
No, what I want to say is I want to echo what you said, because we have this is the language that we use exactly in this context, which is to give up everything. And anyone who has been following especially the last 2 weeks, they've been some of the most difficult weeks of the entire war, and what is called upon for sacrifice, and the sense of ultimate loyalty, ultimate devotion that people are willing to do for the sake of others, and for the sake of the life that is beyond them, uh, because people will sacrifice the ultimate for the ultimate, and so so, we're holding that as an example of a modality that's very, very, it's at the same time as being foreign to us, it's very close to us. We're not there, but we're part of the whole experience in an orbit that's removed from it. But we're understanding that there's sacrifice here. There's definitely sacrifice. Marlene, go ahead.
He valued his life over the life of his wife, though.
Yes, he did. And this is what makes Abraham such an interesting character, because he is, and one could say, and this is based on the text, my reading of the text is, here's a guy who has a very highly developed sense of self-interest and self-preservation, in addition to having some kind of relationship with God, that God needs him. And so it's exactly that sense of self-preservation which is colliding with God's sense of needing him. Felicia, welcome.
Thank you. Oh gosh, not me losing my train of thought. Yeah, I'm wondering if we are reading I'm wondering if there's anything in the text besides when he calls out to God that really tells us that he is frustrated, or if we are taking his building of the altars as a signal of his frustration, like, okay, I'm doing this for you now. What do I get now, kind of thing.
Yes, and well, we're gonna we'll go forward, because that's a great way to try and ask. I've only got 3 altars here so far, but there's more that goes on in the story, and look what happens. We have these, chapter 14 of Kings, the covenant of the pieces, lots and lots of stories here with Abraham, and you could feel the frustration building here. There's no altars here. When is the next altar? Well, God is talking to him all these times. Here, I'm just going to zip through this, and then we get the birth of Isaac. And what happens here? So you would think, I'm just going to, lots and lots of things happen here. There's no more altars that are being built, which tells me something. It tells me I'm gonna just, I built my first altar when I came in. I built my first altar when I moved to the south. I built my third altar when I came back from Egypt. 0. Okay, I'm done building altars now, and I have this whole, there's lots of things going on. There's a war. There's this. There's that. And my wife Sarah she wants a child. And so she gives me Hagar to be to be the mother of a child, to surrogate a child. And so I always like a joke with this, which is, okay, fine. They have a child, and that creates problems. And finally, the angels come in after the circumcision, and they promise that Abraham will have a child. That's chapter 21. Okay. And Felicia, your question was, does he ever show frustration? And the answer is, let's just look at the reaction here. It's chapter 18 in the book. I don't have it on the screen. So, you recall the story. The story is, Vayomer, one of the angel messengers says, Shava Shuvah Lekha Ka'itcha. I'm going to come back next year, and Yinei ben l'sarai shtecha, and your wife is going to have a son. V'sar shamar petach ohel. She's listening and she, Avraham is Zaras Kenim. They're old. Vatitzchak Sarah b'kirba. She laughs. Okay, and she laughs, and he's already had his laughter. Now, I'm one of the only people I know that interprets this as like, well, maybe I'm not the only person. It's not joy laughter. It's like, sure, sure, I'm going to have a child. And he says, sure, because, his reaction to this whole thing is like, oh, who are you kidding? This is crazy. And they've already developed a certain place in their life where they have to relate to tragedy in this kind of in a humor. It's deeply painful. It's deeply frustrating. And he is saying, I'm going to stay with you, but I'm in pain here, and the only way I can alleviate that is by kind of like laughing it off, I think. And I think I read that as the expression of his frustration. Okay. Now, permit me with the time remaining just to do this, to go on. So he finally gets his child, Isaac. Vayigdal hayeled, vayigamal. The child is grown up. This is next week's parsha. And he makes this is how it's translated, a drink fest. It's a feast, a mishteh. Like this is Everett Fox's translation. Okay, it's a mishteh shata, drinking. But I read that and I go like, wait a minute. If Abraham, this is a kind of question that I would get in the class here. If Abraham's so pious and so religious, you would think that now is the time that he would build an altar, right? This is a perfect time for a sheep and a ox and a cow and the whole deal, the whole menu. No, what is he doing here? He's having a drinking party with his buds, right? And that's exactly. I mean, I'm using that, in a kind of colloquial way to say, like, it's to say, I'm not going to do religious now with you, God. I'm going to do drinking with my buddies. Okay. I'm making and of course the scholars will go, well, it's a weaning feast, and anthropologically speaking, it's a rite of passage and all that, and fine, okay. So it's a rite of passage, and we're going to symbolize the rite of passage. And I've interpreted in the past as saying, this is amazing. This is an amazing moment because, it's not a feminist reading of the Torah. It's like, it's saying, I'm dividing, I'm breaking the relationship between mother and son, and I'm establishing father-son relationship. What is weaning all about? Weaning, when the child ceases to be breastfed by the mother and is now part of the father's orbit as opposed to the mother's. And so what's happening here is it's a very male reading. Okay, you'll forgive me. Okay. It's a very male reading of the very masculine reading, which is, I'm putting you under the orbit of men in the masculine world. I'm taking you out of female space and putting you into masculine space, male space. And for that, we're going to do male things. And that means mishteh. We're going to drink. Okay. That's a very kind of crass reading of it. But I think there's a certain element of truth to that. But what's also true is, I'm not going to take a sheep from the flock and put it on an altar now. It's because I'm putting that aside. God hasn't really, we've talked at Sodom, but I'm 100 years old, and this is what I'm supposed to be the father of a nation. What do I have? I have a baby when I'm 100 years old. This is crazy. Ilana, go ahead.
I'm sure you're going to get into the following sacrifice.
Yes.
One that is
the one that
how can you even think about
okay, very good.
So I'm sure we will discuss.
We're going to get there. That's okay. Go ahead. And Marlene, you have a question?
He didn't do that for his first son.
That's right. He didn't make a sacrifice either. Okay. So
and at that time, Sarah didn't claim him because he had Ishmael before Yitzchak. So there should have been I'm taking this kid to be mine, and then do the same mishteh.
Yeah. Okay. So right. But we're going to go to altar number 4, the Kedah. So they go to the place, and there is our famous our words by Yiven Sham Avram et HaMizbeach. He's building the altar there, and arranged the wood. Puts him on, and then what happens? He lived. We know that his hand, he doesn't sacrifice him, and then that all happened. I left all that out here. Sorry, okay, because it'll take us too far away. But what happens? Look carefully. What happens after God intervenes, or the angel intervenes and tells him, "Stop." Right? Do not lift your hand. Now I know. He sees a ram. But no, this is the first time it tells us in the text of the Torah that he actually makes a sacrifice. Everywhere else, okay? Could have put potatoes on the altars there. I don't know what. This is the only time it tells us that he makes an olah, and he takes the ram. He takes the ram that's there. And I make a little cup here. We'll get to that maybe next week, which is that a ram is a domesticated animal, and the ram is caught in a thicket. What's it doing away from a flock? It's a male sheep. It should be breeding, but it's somewhere on the mountain. I don't know. All right, so Abraham takes this ram and offers it up instead of his son. And that's when God says, Abraham names the place. And now the messenger says, Binishpati, Num Adonai Yana Sharasita the Davar Azeh, Lo Chasachta bin Chayichere, Varecha Varecha, Varbar Betzarecha, Kechokvei Hashem. He gives you now, I'm going to give you the blessing, the full-on blessing, okay? Asher al Svatayam, Virash, Aracha, Sharava. I'm going to give you the main blessing now. This is it. So the sacrifice has elicited a blessing from God. And it's a blessing that is at its core a blessing of fertility, right? That is what's going on. And I have three more altars in Genesis: altar 5, Isaac's altar; altar 6, which is another Jacob's altar, and altar 7 is Jacob's last altar. Okay, which we don't have time to get to. But what I want to say is as follows: an altar, you'll appreciate this very highfalutin word, is a multivocal symbol. It is multivocality. There are many voices in an altar. Okay. One voice could be thanksgiving. Yes. Another voice could be awe. Another voice could be, I want something from you. I'm eliciting something from you, and I'm not getting it yet. I think this and more is happening here. When Abraham finally sacrifices the ram instead of Isaac, it's as if the floodgates of blessing just pour out. He gets all of that. Now, does all of that happen to Abraham in his lifetime? No, it doesn't. It's going to take 2 more generations for there to be the kernel of this people. Okay, I believe that what Isaac is doing in his creation, he builds one altar, and what Jacob does, he builds 2 altars. And how about that? The patriarchs all together have 7 altars. Dung, what a coincidence, number 7, okay? There's a seven altars here for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all right? And the message, at least implied in all of them, is a very basic message: fertility of the people. That the offering on an altar is to elicit response, blessing as response. And the blessing that is issued as a response to it is not only the blessing of fertility in the case of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's a blessing that your people, there'll be multitude of them. B, they will live in the land. And C, they will be a blessing throughout the world, that the whole world will be blessed through them. And that seems to me to be the story that's wrapped up in this symbolism, that in the very complicated way that the Torah is trying to explain this or to narrate this, we're getting a rich story of what it is that God wants and how it is that human beings are responding, and how it is that humans are reaching for God for blessing, and how complicated it is. That it's not, that what this religion is more in terms of what it's not. This religion is not, you do this and you get this. You press here and you get. So we make the mistake, that, I mean, it's very tragic sometimes. And of course, in the context of a class, I can speak, when someone says, make a mishaberach for me, you want that to have a response, or let's even turn it up, in a sense. Every day, every week, every Shabbos, every morning, Monday, Thursday, we make the mishaberach for the chatufim, okay, for the hostages, and it's so painful. It's beyond, okay. And in our most deepest fervor, we are praying, and nothing, and like they're not released. And so you say, what do I need to do as a supplicant, to elicit that response? And then you kind of hit yourself over the head with a 2x4 and say, I don't think it works that way. My prayer is an expression of anguish. I want you to note my anguish as a Jew in this year, that there are Jews that are held captive under the cruelest, most ruthless, barbaric regime that we can find. All right. And I want you to notice that. Of course, I want them to be freed. And of course, I will thank you when they're freed. But I just don't press a button and get a response. That's not how it works. And it's in the Bible. It's not magic, folks. The Bible is not biblical religion is a polemic against magic, because magic means that I have power, that all I have to do is mix the right potions and say the right words and make the right, kind of, mantras and abracadabras, and I'll get the world to respond to me. And here's Abraham, who would love that very much, who would love, when I build an altar, I'd love to get a child. I'll build you 3 altars. I want to get a child already. But it doesn't happen. So this is a realistic presentation of the world. This is not magic, folks. This is how it works. God is with us, and God will take his time, I guess. Go ahead, John.
Well, this is a little different than what you said, I think. You said it's not simple, you do this and you get that, but it seems to be the language of Deuteronomy that that's what happens. It's just the way it's presented. You do this and you get that.
You're absolutely right. And so, our religion has to navigate in this world of religion. Deuteronomy is an interesting book because it's creating this modality of quid pro quo, right? And already in Genesis you're seeing, and I would argue also that if we read it closely too, and apply some interpretive tricks there, it's not exactly that either. However, you can't be faulted for seeing and for hearing numerous sermons or readings, that say, if you do this, you'll be blessed. If you won't do this, you'll be cursed. I mean, that's exactly what it says. And so how would it not lead a person to say, well, I guess I should do this and therefore I'll be blessed. I mean, people do live that way at a certain point. They
So what
want to
science?
elicit, they want to
How do I
elicit
do that?
they want to elicit blessings for good things that they do. We talk that way all the time, and I want to be forgiven for talking that. I want to be excused for talking that way because it's a way of a human being. Bob, go ahead.
Now, there are two things I want to say. First is a question that goes back to the beginning of today's class. You said that altars demarcate time.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what your thoughts are of what is being demarcated relating to each of these altars. That's question one.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
And question two is, in a way, why was Abraham selected? I heard a recent fascinating talk about Noah that gave me a much, 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 much more positive sense of who he was and what Abraham may have learned from Noah. Because where did Abraham develop chesed? And someone said that Noah's caring for the animals and all the other things was actually a potential archetype of what was passed on to Abraham.
Nice.
And all of that. And so I'm wondering, back to the time question, what is being demarcated?
So okay, let me ask the first question first, and that is, I think when Abraham builds all these altars, he wants to force the junction. He is saying, I want there to be a pre-barren era and a post-barren era. I want the era before my altar to be the era when I had no children. I want the era after my altar to be the era of children. And that happens 3 times, okay? And then it doesn't happen. I think he gives up. And then the altar at the sacrifice of Isaac, well, this is the most tragic of them all. And to me, it's tragic, but I guess it's painfully obvious what's happening there. It's the altar that shifts the relationship of God and Abraham. You can, clearly apply that reading, which is everything before that moment is pre, and everything post is post. Nothing is the same after the Akedah. So the altar becomes the final demarcation point. We have 3 more altars, one with Isaac and 2 with Jacob, and it would if I pursue this theme when we get to those parshas, we could possibly look at that, but they do signify some boundaries in time too. Yeah, they do. All right. Anybody else? Well, I'm exhausted. This is getting back in shape. All right. Thank you all for being here. Just pause.